less me, more you.
Less you?
Wait, what?
Less you?
Well, I can hear myself louder than I can hear you, and you guys are loud.
Okay. I still have the opposite problem. I think I can hear me through your mics more than I can hear you through my mic. That becomes.
I'm with you, Phil.
Yeah.
I sound great.
Wait.
How did the timer reset?
That's because we just now went live.
Oh, okay.
Are you? Let me hear how loud you are.
Okay. Here's me talking now.
Is that better?
That is better. Actually, that's better. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Who else?
Ow.
Apparently, Chris.
Ow. That's very loud. YouTube, number 4, down. Thank you.
What? I can't turn it up any louder.
Yeah.
It's already as loud as it goes.
All right.
It's yeah, that's it. Training the legs, walking on sunshine. What? Turn it up? It doesn't go nowhere. Special Monday morning song. Gonna do a top 10 list of songs to listen to on Monday morning. Sugar's bitch. You were ripping out your fucking suck your nose.
What point are we drinking out today?
We'll leave that up to you, I think. I mean, that part of the show is kind of follow your lead, you know.
So.
No.
Well, you did drink beer, so I didn't drink beer 2 weeks in a row. Okay. Oh yeah, that was like a red syrup. Yeah. No, this one was bad, dude. Yeah.
Oh, come on.
I don't remember which one it was. It was like yeah, but there was a particular one I hadn't had.
God. What the shit?
Oh, I can put that all under one sample.
Yeah, it was a single.
No, that's why I said single. Right. Oh, single. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't care. It's only 14%. 4 years old. You know, working in cahoots.
Yeah. I don't remember the brand name.
Cahoots?
I used to buy it back in case. For like $15 case. So I was good for a case.
Yes, it's right there on the page.
Well, that's the pre-break.
Yeah, it does, to be fair, it always is pre-break. Like everything, like this is pre-break. The intro is pre-break. Yeah. This is pre-break.
Alright, I see how this is.
Yeah.
Post break. Post break on the
We don't have those break. All we have is store.
well,
Store.
well, it looks like we just read the BJCP style guide.
Oh, no, we got that big. I heard it on both sides.
Yo.
More guy wants to read. Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, agree. Most of the beers that I enjoy actually are made with ingredients. Weird. Yeah.
I don't know what that is. I think it's just this little dragon all night. buy them.
Beef,
You
yeah.
try it. Are we like audio live?
No. Well,
That's good.
they can probably hear in the background. So. Yeah, it's not muted. Okay. Where the? You guys know who's doing what parts and shit?
Yeah.
Y'all, it's just picking up whatever's picking up on this. It's not the actual mics. Yeah. All right. We are going live now. Real live. I was just making sure. I was just testing the level of how loud it's going to be. Ignorance, you know. Yeah, what did I do with my beer? Yeah, that must be my beer. I never opened it. Wait till 13 seconds in. Yeah. Mm-hmm. not learning how to do this crap. Oh yeah. I've had a beer since then. I wasn't really prepared to talk about it. It was a fun little trip. We went down to Houston and to Katy, and yeah, those guys just really kicked ass yeah. So they had some good beers and got to hang out with some of those guys and good time. Yeah. Last year, yeah, exactly. The sound is hard. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe we are off. Probably not. What the hell? Dude.
Stubby's throwing his hands up in there. I don't know if any of this is actually working. Is it working?
I think it's working now.
I think it's working.
Okay.
Matt. Matthew is saying only one live mic.
Well, whose mic is live, Matt?
Does it matter?
Not really.
Yeah.
Hands and sing Kumbaya.
There we go.
Someone's
All right.
audio is
Apparently
on.
we have it now. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Okay, so here's the explanation for that. We had a fire inspection this week. So I had a few extension cords running. So, I had to fix those, and evidently I didn't plug something back in.
Aha. Okay. All right.
All right, good times.
So, sorry
All
about
right.
that, guys.
Yeah.
So this week the man
Fire
stuck
department.
it to you. All right, so I guess that covers recent happenings.
That's an ender.
Lively conversation.
That's
Al.
an ender.
I mean, we are really off to a rip-roaring start tonight. So let's get straight into Rabbit Hole Brewing. We got several things to talk about since y'all have last been in here. I guess we'll start off by talking about the change to your license. A lot of people may not be familiar with it who aren't in the state here, but here in Texas, you are only allowed to hold one type of brewing license, either as a production brewery or as a brew pub. And then there's obviously different restrictions that go along with how you can distribute your beer and how you can sell it. And you guys opened up initially as a production brewery, correct?
Yes.
That's right, yeah.
So what was the change you made and why?
Well, we started as a production brewery, and that's what we are. That's what we continue to be. The laws in Texas are very weird, and without going into them too much, there are things that production breweries can do that brew pubs can't, and vice versa. One of the things that a production brewery can do is self-distribute all of their beer, and that's what we did when we started, and that's why we got the license that we did. Well, eventually we picked up a collection of distributors to the point where we still have a little bit of self-distribution, not as much anymore, and so the ability to self-distribute all of our beer was no longer important to us, or as important to us. Well, one of the things that a brew pub license can do that a brewery can't is to sell beer for off-premise consumption. In fact, Texas is the only state left in the entire country where breweries cannot sell their beer for off-premise consumption. Every other state can do it.
So you're talking about growlers and crowlers and stuff like that.
And six packs.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole bit.
Prepackaged, okay.
Right. But brew pubs can do that. Brew
Because
pubs,
they're considered in the retail zone. So.
right? Yeah, that gets to the whole 3-tier thing where we were a manufacturing facility. Now we are a retailer. It's the way that they do it. What it does not mean is that we don't necessarily have to operate like a brew pub and have a kitchen and make pizzas and all that crazy stuff that you think of when you think of a brew pub. It's just paper. It's just the way that they do the licenses. But by switching over our license to be a brew pub, we don't really lose anything that we were doing before. But now we can actually sell for off-premise. Now you can come to our brewery and you can, wow, this is a great beer. I want to buy a 6-pack. Well, you can. Whereas previously we just had to tell you, like, I'm sorry, go down to the street and you can buy it there.
Well, a big part of that is because of your size, right? Because as a brew pub, you can only distribute a certain amount of your beer.
True.
Correct? Yeah.
True.
So if you were a large brewery,
It becomes an issue.
It might limit what you could do.
It definitely becomes an issue. We can, as a brew pub, we can grow up to 10,000 barrels a year, which is a lot. Not.
Yeah, that's quite a bit of beer.
It's more than we make now. If we get to a point where we're pushing up against that boundary, then we switch back. We did it once. We can do it again. It possibly would mean that we would have to stop selling 6-packs out of our front door, but hopefully maybe something will happen in the.
All of their beer. And that's what we did when we started.
That's cool. Mute stubby. Yeah. Wow, that's
Pay
a
no
lot.
attention to the man behind the curtain.
Okay, I'll try to ignore myself 5 seconds ago. And the point is, hopefully by the time we grow to the point where we have to change over, hopefully by then maybe they'll fix the stupid laws and we'll be to a point where we can actually do this right.
And I think at this point, for us, it was an easy decision at this point in our existence for the three of us to actually make the decision to switch over to a brew pub, because the climate's changed a lot and the consumer base has changed a lot, where they're looking for a little bit more of an on-premise experience. It's not just a, hey, let me go out to a manufacturing facility, see the shiny steel, and then have a beer. It's like, no, that they're coming for an on-site experience. They want to be able, and if they like the beer, they want to be able to walk away with it and take 6-pack home with them.
So this means you don't have to sell tours and tokens and stuff like that anymore, correct?
That's right.
Do you still do that, though?
No, we switched over, as part of the brew pub, we switched over to a by the pint, which everybody knows. Walking into a bar, you pay for what you drink, and you don't get stuck with
It's a crazy concept. You manufacture something and then just sell it to people.
Right.
Yeah, weird.
We thought it was really good.
So it's working out pretty well so far, I'm assuming. Then, but it's being pretty well received by your regulars. And
Yeah,
all that?
so far so good. I mean, it definitely has changed the way that the Saturdays have gone for us. I mean, we're still open Fridays for happy hour and a Saturday tour. We do Saturday nights during the during summers do night concerts, but it's definitely changed the way people look at us because there's people come in, they'll have what they want, they'll see the shiny equipment, they'll buy some package or they won't, and then they'll leave. And we're a little bit of a destination where it's like, okay, I can go have lunch here, or I can have lunch if Rabbit Hole's got a food truck, and then they leave. Whereas with the tour, I saw the mentality where it was more of, okay, we're going to a brewery, and a brewery does this, and a brewery, you're going to sit here and you're going to drink 3 beers, and so it's changed in that respect, in that we get a little bit more of the casual, let's stop by, have a beer, and then head out.
Yeah, it's a little more loosey-goosey and
Right.
just kind of stop in and do what you want kind of thing. It's odd to me, too, because a lot of the states I go to, there are brew pubs. Texas is the only state that I go to where a brew pub 9 times out of 10 doesn't have food. They'll have a food truck, or they'll have like snacks or something like that.
Well,
when you go to a brew pub in other states, it's a restaurant that brews beer.
Yeah, it depends on what you mean by. If you mean by a place that has a brew pub license, that isn't having a brew pub license doesn't mean you're a brew pub. It's a meaningless distinction at this point in this state anyway.
Yeah, I think that's the distinction.
I mean, the key.
Here it's a paperwork issue, and elsewhere they truly live the brew pub.
Yeah, but I mean,
Right.
like, find a traditional brew pub in North Texas. I don't know of any. That it's a restaurant that also brews beer there.
I can only think of
it's become
one.
this strange paperwork thing. It's so ridiculous to me that
Right.
we have to.
Yeah. Well, back in the 90s when they legalized the idea of a brew pub, there were a lot of actual, honest to goodness brew pubs that opened up. That they served food and they made beer, and they thought, hey, this is great. We can make beer, and it doesn't even have to be good. It doesn't matter because we just call ourselves a brew pub, and people will come.
Well, that was the
that's what they
90s,
did,
yeah.
and the beer was terrible, and and then they all closed because they were awful, and nobody wanted to drink their crappy beer. And really, I think that put the craft beer movement in Texas back by a decade or so.
Well, that was the
because
entire
people-
craft beer movement in the 90s, the big bubble that popped because...
And it gave people the impression that craft beer is terrible because the only craft beer that it ever had was this really nasty stuff that people who had no idea how to make beer, they might sort of kind of know how to run a restaurant, maybe, or not, but they had no idea. They were adding it on as a special feature to try to get people to come to the restaurant.
Right, and I think that back in the 90s, it was you either had really good beer at your brew pub, but the food was so bad that nobody came, or it was the other way around. You had really good food, but the beer was so bad that nobody showed up.
Yeah.
And that's why they all failed. Nobody had good food and good beer.
What's actually the only example I can think of here in Texas is the Big Texan out in Amarillo that everybody knows for their 72-ounce steak challenge. That's part of my sales territory, so every time I'm in Amarillo, I eat there. They have a great brewery there. They really brew nice beer, and it's inexpensive, and I like their food, and that's... It's hard to think of that as a brew pub. It's more of like a circus that serves food,
Yeah.
And from our point of view, I mean, talking about the fact that it's a retailer change for us, this is something that business plan wise, Laren's actually looking at pretty strongly of whether or not for us a satellite true brew pub is something that would benefit for us because the idea is that conceptually, I mean, Justin's a great place and it's a great destination to have some beer. We originally chose it, like Matt said, because it's a manufacturing zone, and you manufacture in where you can get decent real estate.
And the
at a
city
cheap
was
price.
real easy to work with for you, too, if I remember right.
They were, yeah. But if all I'm planning on doing is making product and selling it to a distributor or distributing it, why do I want to do that in a really expensive retail zone?
Right. Were there laws that changed from the time that you opened until the time you did this that also affected your decision? Because there's been a lot of changes in the last few years. I don't remember the timeline on all of it.
I know the laws on brew pubs have loosened up quite a bit.
Yeah, okay.
When we started, I don't think you could actually sell for off-premise as a brew pub even. I think that was in 20... I think that was a couple of years ago that came up, I think.
Yeah, if I remember right, that was like Freetail and St. Arnold, and those guys were all...
So it really kind of opened up what we could do what brew pubs could do, and the breweries were still a bit hamstrung. So I remember when we were first starting, it was like right after we got our license as a brewery when they started loosening the brew pub rules, and we were like, okay, well, do we still want to go forward with the brew? And it still wasn't lucrative enough. It's like, no, we still want to be able to do that self-distribution deal because we're not ready to just jump into a distributor right away. And when we first opened, we were over the limit of what you could self-distribute as a brew pub. So it wasn't until we picked up the distributors and got a point where we weren't relying on self-distribution where we could even consider it.
And you've got pretty good distribution now. I see your beer all over the place. So has this changed at all with the balances for you? Do you feel like you're selling more on premise now, or is it just an easier way to sell?
I think the key to that is it's a way to say yes. You know, and when somebody's on your premise and they're having a good experience, you want to be able to say yes as many times as you can. One of the things that was interesting for us when we picked up a couple of wines to be able to, because every once in a while somebody comes to a brewery and doesn't want beer. They get dragged along with their boyfriend or girlfriend, and you know they're not going to have a beer. But here's a way for us to say yes by picking up a local craft wine that actually adds to the experience. So,
and I think that's important. You bring up a really good point there, and that's one of the things I've liked about your lineup of beers is. Anybody who even likes beer a little bit can pick up a 561, and it's a very approachable beer. Kolsch, I think that about the Kolsch style in general. I think it could be a much bigger style in the country for exactly that reason. You know, Hop Fusion is one of my favorite new breweries around here, but it would be difficult to take someone to Hop Fusion who wasn't a beer drinker because their beers are pretty bold and big, and you got to be into craft beer to drink what they're doing. Where Rabbit Hole, you got a couple there that are very easily approachable, and you could take somebody that just wants to hang out with their friends and isn't necessarily there just for the beer.
Well, I'm glad you think that about the 561.
Cider and mead would be a nice change, according to Matthew Thomas as well. If you can hear that. I don't know. Tell me.
I'm glad he can hear us, yeah.
Well, he may not be able to hear me.
But I'm glad you think that about the 561, and that's interesting for what the beer we'll be talking about a little bit later with El Canejo, because although they're both light beers, they definitely hit different parts of our portfolio, and they're definitely different beers, and they project differently, and that's a neat thing to talk about here on something like...
Yeah, and you know, that whole subject of the lighter lagers and the stuff we're going to talk about tonight, I think is an... underappreciated aspect of the style, because the flavors are more nuanced, and the styles are maybe the kind that you're drinking out by the pool or something, and maybe not paying as much attention to what's in your glass as you are just having some beers and hanging out. But there are a lot of different type of beers that all look the same in the glass and might seem the same when you approach them, and are completely different beers when you talk about like a Kolsch and a Mexican lager and a Pilsner and all that kind of thing, which are really vastly different. You know, very much like the difference between an Irish Red and an Irish Stout, you know, but it gets lost a little bit, I think, just because of the environment they're drank in, and they get kind of overlooked sometimes. So I like that aspect of this whole subject.
So something else that the brew pub lets us go, I mean, lets us do is the fact that, and this is something that we're starting to get into the pipeline now, is that we're able to do a lot more beers in our tasting room and offer them for sale. So test batches, something that we're not necessarily ever intending to put on widespread market, but again, it's for that on-site experience, is to put test batches, put experimental beers, put beers that's like they're going to show up in the tasting room, but are we going to bite the bullet and put a 40 barrel or 80 barrel production run out of it?
The School
Maybe
of
not.
Bach yeast starter.
Right.
Like
And to that, we actually did something very recently where we had it was 4 different homebrew clubs took part of it. We gave away our saison yeast after we brewed the Wonderlust, and then I said, hey, you know what? There's no strings attached to this, but if you want, let's come back and let's just do. Saison is such an open style. Let's do something really, really crazy. Come back and we'll judge the beers, and we'll tell you what you think. We'll give you some cool prizes, and we did it a completely hedonistic judging, so no score sheets and stuff. And we sat down and we had the yummiest, the craziest, and the most
refreshing,
and the most refreshing. And those people, because we have the ability to do it in the tasting room, we're going to actually have them back up. We're going to do another 10-gallon pilot batch, put it in the tasting room, let them help us sell the beer, and just have some fun with it. I mean, something awesome. Neat like that.
It sounds like it's overall just a lot more interactive experience, and just a lot. It sounds more fun, to be honest. Just to put it simply, I mean, on your end, it sounds like you get to play around a little bit more and just have a little more fun, just being around when people come and get some of your beer instead of having to jump through hoops.
It definitely does open up what we can do on premise with the beers that we do. One thing we've started doing is the first Friday of every month is Firkin Friday, and so we'll just have some crazy. It might be something we normally brew that we've augmented somehow. It might be just a random thing that we brewed, 5 gallons of or 10 gallons of, threw it to Firkin. There you go. But it's different every time.
So the last one was Rapture with toasted pecan and pomegranate.
Oh, see, that sounds perfect.
It was
disgusting.
delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Pecans are just the devil.
Is there any left of that one?
No.
Nope.
No.
All gone. Sorry.
Not from that batch, but maybe it'll come back. I mean, it was very tasty, but it lets us play around with some stuff, and that's.
See, I'm excited too because I'm getting ready to move up closer to you guys now. I'll be right down the road.
Yep.
I'll be able to come up more often, so that's cool. Okay, so that kind of covers the licensing change and the change there. I think from here on out, you kind of had an idea what you wanted to talk about in terms of things that are upcoming and this new beer that you're putting out. So why don't you kind of...
Well, things are upcoming. I mean, I want to give El Canejo its due, so we can talk about that. And the Mexican lager for us was kind of an interesting thing. And I imagine that the way that beer ideas go is a lot how you guys figure out what you're going to talk about in your podcasts. First, you start drinking, and then you start writing down ideas. We actually did this. I mean, we do this a lot at brainstorming sessions. It's important. It's an important team building thing for us too. But for this one, it was kind of interesting because I remember we were in Laren's office and we were going around with some ideas, and there are some crazy ideas like a watermelon stout or a cranberry pumpkin cream ale or something. You're cringing like that's a bad thing. We're coming out with that next week.
I look forward to trying it, sir. And
I'll drink cranberry pumpkin
I'm
beer.
just messing with you.
He is just messing with you.
But
thank you.
I want to try the watermelon stout.
But it was one of those things that we just kind of went around, and this wasn't a crazy augmentation. It was like, look, that has a place, and you can make a great light lager without compromising the ingredients or the flavor, and still make it a lawnmower beer, make it a gateway beer for people coming into it, craft beer and home brewing, but also make it a beer that's like, you know what? Sometimes I'm just not in for that double bourbon barrel bourbon stout. I just want something light and drinkable. So we went down that road, and I wanted to call it El Biro. That was eventually overruled, but I think we came up with a great name that fits us.
So what does the name mean?
It means the beer. No, it means
The Canejo?
The Canejo, yes.
It's Spanish for the Canejo.
Yes.
It means the rabbit, right?
Yeah, the rabbit.
And I think
Canejo is rabbit. El Canejo, it's the rabbit. And we went through all kinds of different names, things that were relevant that sounded good. Then once we started looking at these, we went through as much background checking as we possibly could to make sure, does that mean something else we don't know about?
Right. Kind of like Paladoro.
Yeah.
Or Nova.
Right. It was like, okay, we got to look at this from every single angle because we don't want it to bite us. So okay, who do we know that we can trust that will tell us honestly, does this mean something that, and we did our research. We didn't find anything bad. So
we asked
kinda
at
sounds-
least 3 people.
It kind of sounds like the name of a professional wrestler. El Canejo.
El Canejo.
Probably. It
Played
probably
by Jack
was.
Black.
Yes.
Yeah, it probably was.
Coming off the top rope.
Yes.
So talk to us about the recipe formulation. Like, what is the approach? What is it you're looking to land on when you start talking about brewing this kind of beer?
So for a Mexican lager, I mean, most the European influence to Mexico in beer was almost completely German or Bohemian or Czech, Eastern European. So whenever you taste even the classics that are coming out now, you're tasting an influence. Dos Equis is clearly a German-style Pilsner that then has been augmented through time, but that's where it started from. So I decided that we'd probably try to take more of a Bohemian look at it. But if you taste Bohemia from Mexico, it definitely doesn't have the hop presence that your normal Bow Pills is going to have. So it was looking more of the Bohemian, very simple grain bill, get a great Pilsner malt, add a little bit of Vienna for some nuance and some je ne sais quoi. I don't know how to say that in Spanish.
Burrito.
Is that? Thank you.
It translates literally to burrito.
I was wondering about that. And then let the yeast be the showcase there, because it's really about how can you get a good lager fermentation to it and give it that clean, crisp finish, and not overpower you with hops like a German Pilsner can sometimes.
Yeah, generally the Pilsners, Bohemian Pilsner, German Pilsner, they all use a lot more hops, both in bittering and in aroma across the board than anything you're going to find in the light lager category, like a Mexican lager. So it was one of the things that was kind of jettisoned over time as the Mexican version of the German beers evolved. So we weren't making a Pilsner. We were trying to, it needed to be something much more pulled back from that. Recipe, when you get right down to it, once you've identified what your inspiration is, there's not much to it. It's not a complicated recipe. It's got Pilsner malt. It's it. I mean, and then a little bit of Vienna, just to give it a.
That in itself is a challenge, though. To do not much and to make it come out how you want it.
And then the hopping the same way. It's got to have. Okay, it's very, very light, so it's got to have some hops, but not enough that you really notice them. You would definitely notice their absence. It's just a very slight, subtle quality, both in the bittering and in the aroma. But again, it's a very crisp, clean. Yeah,
it's just enough to keep it from being sweet. Basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Most beers they're either malt driven, or they're hops driven, or they're yeast driven. Like a stout is a malt driven style. An IPA is a hop driven style. A lot of your Belgian beers, those are yeast driven styles. This is not. It's really defined by its lack of any distinguishing characteristic.
That's a good way of putting it, actually.
Do the commercial examples that we're familiar with, whether it's Corona, Modelo, Pacifico, any of those? I don't know this for a fact, but when I think about it, just from the flavor, I would think that they're probably adjunct free, right? That those are all malt beers.
I don't know about the Corona.
Yeah, I don't think it is,
but I know Pacifico is.
Okay, and I think that's an important distinction if you want to talk about a light, easy drinking beer, and one that doesn't have adjuncts
Take
in
the
it.
adjuncts out.
It's not getting sugar from an alternate source and sometimes flavor from it.
Right.
No. I mean, generally those adjuncts are used in order to lighten the body, to make it a lighter, crisper beer. So if you're not using that, then you've got to do something else in order to give it the same characteristic, if that's what you're going for. If you're trying to get a really light-bodied, crisp beer without using any adjuncts, it's I wouldn't say it's more difficult. But personally, I don't find the flavors to be all that pleasant when you add adjuncts.
I
okay,
agree.
great. I've lightened it. Well, that made it worse. That wasn't an improvement. Why did you do that?
With rice, you're kind of dropping the bottom out of the flavor, and with corn, you're adding a corn flavor to it. And,
exactly. So those don't really enhance the beer at all. So it's really just, okay, I want more alcohol, but I don't want it to taste like anything. So let's use this. No, I actually do want it to be an enjoyable beer. I don't want it to taste like fermented rice syrups, and so you don't add them. So when you're looking at that, then you will. I know one of the things that a lot of those adjunct beers will have is they use 6-row malt.
Because they're looking for the conversion.
Because they're looking for the conversion.
adjuncts.
And so if you take it from, okay, well, I want to make an all-grain version of this really light beer like that. How do I do that? Well, I know they use 6-row grain. I don't want to use the adjunct, so I use all 6-row. Well, that's pointless. There's no need to do that. The only reason the 6-row's there, it's got more enzymes in it to help convert all the stuff that can't convert itself. If you're not using rice, if you're not using corn, or even if you're using it but it's less than 25% or so, then there's no need for that. There's no reason to burden yourself with trying to find 6-row malt for your beer.
Yeah, especially with today's malts. I mean, the diastatic power on standard 2-row is pretty high.
It is.
And that's
It's-
what we're talking about. Is the rice, the corn doesn't convert itself. You need something with diastatic power, enough enzymes basically to convert that. 2-row will convert some of it, but 6-row has so much enzymes that
You
it
can
will
get into like
yeah.
50%
Right.
adjuncts and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and
you can do significant adjunct beers with the 6-row.
No,
So
the other flip side with that is, okay, great. So I've decided I'm going to make a really light, crisp, Mexican lager, but I'm not going to use any adjuncts at all. And I have no glass, and you're pouring beer, and I feel left out.
I'll get you. Oh, Tom's got you a glass.
I'm sad now. Okay, so I gotta actually make beer happen here. But so if you want to do this and actually make it so that it is light and crisp and doesn't use any kind of trickery such as cheating on the ingredients using adjuncts, then it's basically it's basically just mashing it properly and fermenting it properly. A nice cool mashing for probably an extended a bit longer than you normally would in order to convert every little bit of sugar that's in there in order to make it something fermentable is going to help. But the secret really comes in the fermentation, low and slow. It's kind of like making a roast, it's you need to be a big, strong pitch of yeast at a low temperature for a long time. Don't rush it.
And that's really just to restrain the yeast activity and keep it from producing any extra flavors that you don't want in there?
That's part of it. The other part is to let it finish its job because it doesn't act very fast.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it too warm, then it will finish faster, but you'll have flavors you don't want. You'll have some weird off. Usually it's a bit estery, kind of fruity, and not bad, but not what you want. If you don't let it go long enough, then it won't finish. And that can be one of two things. Either it's just unfermented and it's weirdly sweet, or it'll be fermented, but it doesn't have time to clean up after itself. Lagers one of the reasons they take longer is because they do throw off a lot of weird flavors and a lot of really weird aromas during the first primary fermentation phase. And it's got to have time to clean up after itself. If you don't give it that time, then you're going to have diacetyl. You're going to have, potentially some sulfur artifacts. You're going to have some weird stuff you don't want in that beer.
Sorry about the random keep talking, Matt. I realized we were talking about the beer, but we weren't drinking the beer, so I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to give it a taste. And one of the things that's interesting to note, you were talking about 561, and we could talk about this now or later, but another key to something, specifically this style, is the water.
Okay.
And I don't mean importing water from Mexico so that...
Please don't do that.
Yeah. It's more about actually the water difference, plays a big part in this because it's going to play it's going to give you a difference on that perceived bitterness too.
So are you using a softer water profile?
Right.
Yeah, okay, so similar to like your
significantly softer water, right?
Right. So in this one, the Kolsch and this beer actually by numbers have 1 IBU of difference.
Really?
But there's a definite distinct bitterness perception on your palate between the two, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I think to this date, Laren's only had one person that said that was too hoppy, and the Kolsch was much better.
Oh, really? Yeah, if someone's saying that this is too hoppy, they are obviously a very, very inexperienced beer drinker. They don't know what they're tasting at all. What's interesting to me about this, and we've seen a couple breweries pop up with this style. Was it Deep Ellum did... what was the one they did? They had
Nito?
Nito Bandito,
Nito
yeah,
Bandito.
which I thought was real good. There's another one that I don't remember which brewery it was. It's actually called Mexican Lager, but it's spelled Logger. That's been good.
Yeah.
This has always been to me since when I first started liking to drink beer, through when I started to get into craft beer, to when I started brewing and everything. I have always liked Mexican lagers. I like Corona. I like Dos Equis, I like Pacifico, I like all of those, and it's one of these much maligned styles that it's one of these things that people immediately grow out of and turn their nose up at when they get into craft beer. Partially, I think, because a couple of them come in light bottles and they're usually skunked when you get them, and partially just because it's kind of just looked down upon. And I've always thought I love when breweries come out with a beer like this.
Or they've
It's
got a
just
little green apple in them.
super easy. Oh yeah, a little green apple. Yeah, I've had that too. To me, anytime you can have something that's super approachable and real easy to drink and everything, I really like that. And
Well, I think it's one of those, breweries will put out a German Pils, or they'll put out a Czech Pils, or these styles that people are like, well, I don't know what that is. But you put out a Mexican lager, everyone goes, oh, okay, cool, I know what that is.
Yeah.
It's just a Mexican version of a German beer, but
It's a real
and Matthew Thomas is saying they go well with dill pickles and pork rinds.
Well, then
Chicharrones.
Not wrong. Not wrong.
sometimes though, I do wonder. It's like, oh yeah, I know what a Mexican lager is. And then I was like, that's actually really good. I was expecting sort of a skunk-like flavor. That's every Mexican lager I've had before that has that flavor. Why doesn't this have
We're
that?
so used to
It's like,
I actually
bad beers, I think.
because we skipped the 3-minute skunk edition.
Yeah,
I was
We didn't
gonna
put it
ask
in
if
there.
you put this in a clear fermenter
Yeah.
and opened up the doors so that you could get some of that
Yeah.
flavor in there. It was funny. We did that mead brewing at James Alon's house recently, and it was fizzy yellow beer was the theme of it. So everybody was supposed to bring some fizzy yellow beer, and someone brought Corona in cans. And Stubby and I were sitting around drinking, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever had this in a can. It's like a completely different beer than in the bottle."
He was
And
talking about that earlier. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go get some Corona on my way home from work.
It really is. I would say Heineken is the same way, except that I just don't think Heineken's good either way,
Yeah.
personally.
well, I remember many years ago I was at a conference and they had an open bar. And that was the good news. Bad news is the beer was terrible. The best option they had was Heineken. I was like, okay, well, it's free, so. So I went up and grabbed a Heineken and I popped open the green bottle and poured it in a glass for me. And I drank. It's like, this is unusual. It doesn't smell like. Well, I'm sure this must be the only bottle. I got like, let me have another one. I'm gonna double check this. So I had another one. I was like, no, that one's not skunky either. I better be totally sure. Let me have a third. So that's pretty much. I drank
6 beers later.
No,
At the end of the night, they're dragging him out. He's going, "I'm just making sure."
I gotta know. But near as I can tell, that Heineken was packaged in the factory in a cardboard box, and it stayed in that cardboard box until they opened it right behind the bar there at the conference. And I'm pretty sure is the first and only time I've ever had Heineken where it wasn't skunked, because it had never seen the light. But it only takes like 10 minutes of having light near it before that'll start to happen.
yeah. Especially in green or clear bottles, it doesn't take much at all.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other things I think about this style of beer, and I'm getting it with this, is that it's one of them that it's like it picks up momentum as you drink it. You like it more, and you want to drink more, and you just want to throw some of these back.
Keep going with that.
I get this. I get this beer the same way.
There you go, buddy.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one feeling that way.
Yeah,
Every sip tastes a little bit better.
I'm just gonna say I feel kind of neglected in here. I'm just
Well,
like,
come on, get
Well,
some, man.
quit
Get in
screwing
here.
up. I mean,
That's what you get for putting yourself behind glass.
you had my mic turned off for half the episode.
The other thing I like about this style a lot is that it goes really well with food. This is one that you can really when you're eating spicy food and you need to drink. It's not
chips
real
are
high in
gonna be
alcohol,
awesome.
and chips and salsa or burritos or tacos or whatever. That's probably why
tacos.
Je ne sais quoi translates to burritos, because it's
Right.
talking about this beer. But no, I've always thought that about these beers is they're just perfect with the same type of food you like to eat in the summertime when you're eating outdoors and just
All of it.
all of it.
Yeah.
Goes well with cold food, warm food, hot food.
So
in that
Matthew Thomas says, so Heineken is German for vampire. Got it.
It's Dutch, actually.
Nah,
That's true. It would be Dutch for vampire.
or vampire. Yeah.
So in our
If it gets
brainstorming
lighted.
sessions, we actually talked about doing in the Mexican lager vein. We actually talked about doing something like a Negro Modelo too. I mean, it gives you a good chance to work with some deep bitter black as from a recipe standpoint and get some dark color. But you're again, where do you think they got that German Schwarzbier? kind of it's that European influence, but
Well, that's actually a Vienna lager, isn't it?
Yeah.
the Negro, yeah.
One of the very few examples
It's-
of an
yeah,
actual
one of the only commercial
Vienna
examples.
lager that you can buy. Yeah, I've heard people say Sam Adams Boston Lager, but that's way too hoppy.
Sure.
Right.
I think it started off kind of based on that. But if you're wanting to know what a Vienna lager tastes like, Boston Lager is not going to be it. Negro Modelo is one of my very favorite beers. I love that beer.
And ultimately, we just kind of came to it and said, ultimately, when we're going to come out with a Mexican lager, and especially in Texas, and people want light and easy drinking, they judge by color.
Yep, absolutely.
I'll tell you,
And so in this case, it was really give the masses what they want, give the people what they want, and I think we came out with a pretty good example of something that.
Yeah, when I see that in the grocery store near me, I'm not going to walk by it. That's definitely going in the cart.
And you know what I like about this too at a brewery like yours, where you got to drive a little bit to get there. If you're the one driving and you're there for an hour or so, you can have a couple of these and you're okay. More and more, I'm appreciating beers like that at breweries, where if they've got something light and easy drinking and refreshing and not real high in alcohol, that I can just go there and have fun being there and have a couple beers and feel okay that, I'm not wasted in the middle of the day. I can carry on with the rest of my day now. So I like that a lot about them too.
The lawnmower beer.
Yeah.
The lawnmower beer, yeah.
I thought that was a exclusive style for a very long time until I moved up here and started learning more about beers. And
that's right, because you were in Houston with St. Arnold, right?
Yeah, so I saw lawnmower, and then during summer they'd have the weed whacker.
Yeah.
You're trying to find that in the BJCP. Where's the lawnmowers chapter?
So, is this going to be a full-time production beer? Is this something you're going to be making regularly?
Right now, this is just something we came out in Season of Virtue 2017. So,
okay.
I mean, this is the follow-up to Wonderlust after our saison. We wanted again something that Alice would approve of in the Season of Virtue.
All right.
So, and again, something that wouldn't,
so maybe
wouldn't
the next
put you on
Season
your
of
ass
Virtue,
when you had two or three of them.
Yeah, I don't know. It's got a really kick-ass logo, though. The artwork's incredible. I might have to brew it again just to reuse the art.
I'd like you to brew it many more times.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. This would be a regular for me. It's. I really like the. I don't know that I would have been able to pinpoint what it was until you told me that it was Vienna, but you can definitely pick out the Vienna malt in there. It's not just a straight Pilsner malt taste. It definitely has an extra little bit of character there in the middle, a little bit burrito.
If you will, right?
I really like the addition of the Vienna malt in there. It really fits in nicely.
Well, it's just so nice and crisp, and it's one of the most approachable beers from a craft brewery standpoint that you could keep this year round and still snot out of it. I mean.
Nope.
So,
would like to.
On that note, let's. There's some sort of upcoming release or something special coming up. You mentioned.
Well, upcoming events. I mean, shameless plug. We have our night tours, which we do night concerts every other Saturday, which are wildly popular because it's hot and that screaming, burning star in the sky is not screaming and burning at you. So we do that during the summer. Matt has started up a Friday night trivia night, the last Friday of every month.
Now you have my attention.
What?
Now you have my full attention.
All right. No karaoke, though, Chris. Sorry. And Laren's actually starting up trade days where we're going to have local tradesmen, farmers markets out at the brewery on a Saturday afternoon. Again, trying to add to the experience. It's something, and I point out whose ideas they are, because they're truly these guys' ideas, and they're coming up with different and new ways of making Rabbit Hole the destination that we want it to be for people. Something give them different things to do. As far as we do have some upcoming interesting beers coming up too, and to again giving El Canejo its time. We are talking about light lagers. I don't want to talk about something that's definitely not a light lager for too long, but we have a really interesting beer coming up that we're going to do some different things with, and it is a rather interesting strong Scotch ale that we are going to do multiple augmentations of throughout the year, but the first one's going to start out. That's going to be released in the Season of Fear, because it truly is a beer to fear. It will not be one that you can come up and drink a few of them. And
luckily I can take a growler with me now.
Right,
so
right. But that's called Shield Biter. I believe this is the second beer in a row that
Shield Biter?
Shield Biter.
Okay.
I
This
thought
is
he
second
said
beer
Shield
in a row
butter.
that
That's what I-
butter too.
butter really.
Shield Butter.
No. This is actually the second beer in a row that Laren has named for the brewery. And it's a very interesting concept because it lets us play into our chess concept. So if you haven't been paying attention, we've actually been doing a chess set through our glasses. Through certain glasses, we give away pawns at our special tastings, and we have different beers that actually will represent ultimately a playable chess set.
That's really cool.
So Shield Biter, it actually comes from a famous chess set. It is
The Lewis chess set.
And the Lewis chess set, and Laren found this and became enamored with it, and it's a really, really neat concept, and so we're kind of using the view or what those pieces look like as some of the concept art for what we're doing with the Shield Biter. But the Shield Biter is starting off as a wee heavy, and you're going to get that base beer as its own, and then we're going to do some other interesting things with it.
Cool.
Following on. So,
Do you mind if we go ahead and retain the legal rights to Shield Butter?
We'd like to do a beer called Shield Butter with you.
We'll talk. And we also have an interesting collaboration coming up. Yes, you can have Shield Butter without a doubt.
All right,
cool.
cool.
We have an
I
interesting
don't want it.
collaboration.
I don't know what we're going to do with it, but
Neither do I. Neither do I. And honestly, what you do and over there behind the glass is your business.
Good luck with that one.
We also have an interesting collaboration coming out in the season of fear called Midnight Snark, and what that is that's our dark snark that we actually pumped up and brewed it a little bit higher than export, and then we put it in Witherspoon barrels.
remind us what the Dark Snark is.
Dark Snark is our export stout with strawberries. So before I put put strawberries in it, then we took it and put it into Witherspoon bourbon barrels.
Nice.
So that's going to be the Midnight Snark that's going to come out in bottles and draft, probably right around North Texas Beer Week.
Excellent.
When about is that?
Late October.
Late October. Yeah, it's the last week.
Yeah, it used to be
last
in
week of
November,
October.
late October, I think. So right around
Okay.
Halloween time.
So everything comes to a halt as I ask Stubby where we are on time. Okay. Well, I think we're getting close to
that
the
we've
break
been
here.
talking for 10
Did we
minutes, or-
have any other upcoming stuff or special releases you want to talk about, or?
Or were you saying that you brought some of that for us?
I do have that. Why don't we come out of the break and we'll do that. And
All right,
pop
that
some more
sounds
light
good.
lagers.
That sounds good.
Completely
Is that a good
opposite of
tease?
light lager.
So when we come back, we're going to do
Yeah.
that, and we're going to talk about American Light Lager, American Lager, International Pale Lager, and then Greg says maybe pills.
Maybe
I don't
pills? I don't know.
Maybe pills.
There's two question
Maybe.
marks on that one.
but they're before the Senate starts, so
So how do you
Yeah,
inflect before maybe? I don't.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, that you
Maybe
did it
pills.
before with that delay. You do it first, and then you watch yourself do it.
Yeah,
Maybe pills.
Maybe it's just a look
Oh,
you have
it's
to have on your
gone.
face.
Oh.
Yeah.
yeah. It's not even there anymore. It's just pretty art floating into the sky.
So before we go on break,
stream.
we want to remind you to go to patreon.com/comeandbrewItradio to check it out and see how you can help contribute to the show. We've said it before, and we just want to reiterate, it doesn't need to be a lot. There's as little as $2 a month that you can help contribute and help pay for our Ubers and that kind of thing. We're definitely not making any money off the show, but it does help cover the costs and help us keep bringing good content like this to you. So go to Patreon and check it out and help us out if you can. And we will be back in a little bit. It's not going to seem
Jeez.
like long for you.
No.
No.
Got some music.